What does nihilism, existentialism, postmodernism, individualist anarchism, post-anarchism, post-left anarchy, illegalism, feminism, nihilism, bohemianism, as well as fascism, right libertarianism, and anarcho-capitalism have in common?
Is it my power, Daddy? Please tell me it's my power.
It is your power. It's the world of Max Stirner. He's a German philosopher whose essay we're going to read today. Tell us a little bit about Max Stirner, Phil, and what we're going to read today.
Oh, fuck. He was born like 1800-ish. Just about that. He wrote his... Nick can't decide whether to interject or not. He wrote his magnum opus in 1844 and died about like 12-ish years later, I think. The work is called Of Ego and His Own, I think. And in German it is Der Einzige und sein Eigentum. That's it. So I think we'll have a lot of translation strugglings in this session.
Strugglings, I call it strivings.
Wow, striving is very good. No, it's
we're reading a section of this book today, a subchapter called My Power.
My Power.
My Power. What is it in German? Meine Power.
Yeah, I don't even know. I would guess meine Kraft, but I don't, or meine Macht maybe. I don't even know.
Okay. So tell me, Phil, how did you come across this? This was one of Phil's suggestions for this episode.
Yeah, this is one of a couple of things we are going to be reading from Michael Malice's The Anarchist Handbook. So a kind of compilation of various texts that have been influential on anarchism. And I'll just read the brief introduction that Malice wrote. He says, somewhat of a hipster precursor to Nietzsche, you probably haven't heard of him. Max Stirner's idiosyncratic book Der Einzige und sein Eigentum was supposedly regarded as too crazy to bother censoring. Stirner died largely forgotten, with the only images left behind of him being a couple of drawings by Marx's comrade-in-arms Friedrich Engels. His unique, energetic text later inspired egoists and anarchists alike, though not Nietzsche, who apparently never read him. With the opening salvo of All Things Are Nothing to Me being a cry of proud rebellion, Stirner's reduction of purportedly morally binding concepts such as duty to mere spooks continues to resonate with anarchists today. So, yeah, ideologically, you already kind of said in the intro, Stirner has been picked up by a lot of different schools of thought, and even he himself had kind of let's call it puzzling stances from a today viewpoint. So he was he criticized capitalism and communism and Christianity for very similar reasons, and that is, they kind of putting a moral law above the individual, which, in his philosophy, egoism, everything that's kind of outside of him, he calls them the foreign laws, or foreign rights, or foreign powers. They are limiting the ego, and the ego benefits most when he is aware that everything external is in fact external, and he strives only for his own. He was also part of a kind of Hegelian philosophers group at the time, around like 1840, I guess, with Marx and other people, Feuerbach, Engels, a couple of others that are maybe less well known. And just a very puzzling guy.
Yeah, I was I'd never come across this guy before, and I enjoyed this essay a lot. I think there's a lot to chew through, as well as kind of some very like stark core sentiments that I think are pretty controversial. But yeah, looking at this guy's Wikipedia page, it's actually quite impressive how wide his influence appears to be, and like you said, like how puzzling his philosophy appears. I'm getting kind of slight Zizek vibe, not from his writing, but from that kind of very broad tent, very like amorphous, seemingly quite amorphous philosophy. And although we're just kind of having a small insight here, I think there's probably a lot of depth to this guy, or there's a lot that we could talk about.
He also did open a milk selling business with his wife's inheritance, which he squandered because the business went under and he got divorced. So yeah.
Well, he was friends with Engels, so
yeah, literally. Literally squandered the milk money and got dumped for it. So that's kind of sad. All right, let's get into it. So as Nic said, we're reading a little chapter only from part 2 of his book, called My Power. The chapter is called that. And he kind of establishes his thoughts on the subject of right. What does it mean to be in the right? Who has a right? Who gives a right? And, well, long story short, we kind of get to the conclusion that right is kind of a spook in your mind, and that really might is right at the end of the day, which is a very interesting thing if you want to push that to its limits. I think maybe we can do like a little dialogue where one of us is Stirner and the other one tries to question this idea of might is right in his sense. Which one do you want to go with?
I don't know. I think either could get me equally cancelled. I will take Stirner's argument here, maybe, and try and represent it.
Okay. So Nic, so Mr. Stirner, you say that might is the ultimate right in reality. Then, how about what about Mother Teresa? Right? She's not really forcefully doing anything to anyone, like charitable people like that. Would you say that they are in the wrong for acting charitably?
Are you in the wrong for acting charitably?
Yeah, question to Max Stirner. Because that's not contributing to your ego, right? You're not acting in your own interest. You would assume, right? So what are they doing? What's going on there?
So, this is a difficult question already.
I know. I don't know the answer.
I don't know if whether Stirner would argue that. Maybe Stirner would argue that there is that there is an egoistic benefit to this, to charitable behavior. Maybe that would be like the kind of nihilist stance.
So they're not aware that they're acting in their own interest when they really are.
Or they kind of are, but it's more of a secret interest.
Okay, that's not too... I mean, many people say that about charity, right? That's not too controversial so far. Let me lob you another one then. All right.
What I could also say, though, is maybe...
Yeah.
What you're acting on is what Stirner might call... He calls like foreign right or foreign law, which from what I understand, is the rights that are obtained from society or the state. In this case, it would be the social view that charity is good, that's motivating you, and so this like social idea of right is what compels you to do charity.
Mm-hmm. So they're kind of nested in an ecosystem of foreign morality already, and within that ecosystem, they've actually kind of figured out how to climb to the top by being charitable.
Right.
Okay. So what about an industrialist who has many low-wage laborers? I'm some guy now, and I'm saying to you, Mr. Stirner, what he doing that is not right, because even though he's technically not enslaving those people, their wages are simply too low, and this rich industrialist position in society, it's not right. It's not right according to our laws and ideas about equality of man and so on.
I think this is a bit easier to answer. The might is right. The right is might logic here would say essentially what you can get away with is right. And if it doesn't, it's not a question of whether it's right in a sense beyond the person doing the thing. It's just about what that person is able to do. So if the fact that the industrialist is able to employ so many people at poverty wages is an indication in itself of his right. It's the fact that you can do something that shows your right and kind of like your power in a situation, even though it goes against what would be considered the social right of paying fair wages for a certain kind of labor.
So why, Mr. Stirner, would you say that his ability, so to speak, his power to do something is the true right, and the social idea that we are all equal and should be maybe enjoy equal wealth or something of that note? Why is that not a superior right to the right that you outlined?
I would say the reason that it's right is because I can get away with it. And if I couldn't get away with it, it wouldn't be right. This is Stirner.
My
name is my name is Stirner. I should do it in a German accent. I can't do a German accent.
So Mr. Stirner, right. the Holocaust.
Oh shit. This is where we get into ropey territory.
One might say, Mr. Stirner, that people were unrightfully killed. What's your opinion on that, Mr. Stirner?
I plead the fifth.
Right, and so that's where we get already into very tricky territory here, right? So because if we just take this as its face value, that right is whatever you can get away with, then you kind of have to inevitably also call the most horrific things that ever happened right.
Yeah. This is what's So I think the word there's one thing that's kind of important I think to unpack before we get into, and well at this point is like the word right, according to my copy, which is from Verso Books. There are some annotations about the translation. Annoyingly, they don't actually include the German words, but
it has to be
right.
recht. Yeah.
apparently it said this word has also in German the meaning of, quote, common law.
Yes.
And will sometimes be translated as law in the following paragraphs. So, if we think about it in terms of the word law, as opposed to this kind of like morally weighted word right, then I think it kind of makes a lot more sense. You know, I think a great example is to think about like global affairs, international relations. And there's like different models about what international relations is based off, but one of them is like the anarchist model, which basically says that, you know, there are no laws and countries are free to basically do what they want, but they are limited by what they're allowed, what they're permitted to do, or what is what they're permitted to do by other countries, only by terms of like might. And you know, I think this is kind of like the right way of thinking about how countries interact with each other. It's like when we get to this stage of countries competing with each other, there's no overarching authority that can dish out punishments to every single country in the world. Mm-hmm. Even though we've attempted to create these, you know, international coalitions and governments like the UN, for example, they're, you know, it's like a wild land, right? There is no law when you look at the state of the world through like the lens of countries. So, but then, you know, if you go from that point and then compress it down to individual societies and the individual people that act within them, I think Stirner would say that the same thing applies. And, you know, maybe this is true. You know, we look at like Donald Trump, for example, or like the impeachment attempts and stuff like that, all the lawsuits, and the fact that he managed to overcome those in spite of this huge legal mechanism weighed against him I think Stirner would probably say is a characteristic of his right, or of his might, sorry. Or I guess his right.
So if this was a lesser person, in the sense like someone without wealth or power or renown, then each of those lawsuits could have destroyed them.
Exactly, yeah. And so it's the mighty that naturally filter to the top because they can't be brought down by these, what Stirner would say like the foreign law or the foreign right, which is like the society or the state imposed laws and like moral code and stuff.
Yeah, similarly, you mentioned international law. You know, America has transgressed against international law countless times in various, you know, the war in Yemen, the war in Syria, the war in Iraq, like the list just goes on and on. But when Putin invades Ukraine, then all of a sudden we give a shit about international law, and now he has to be hauled to account, and we can make no concessions and all of this, right? So it's, at the end of the day, it's because America pretty much set up the system of international law and is the most powerful member in it. So, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
Cool. Yeah, I think we need to talk about this word right a bit more as well. Like, it is, as you said, when Stirner says might is right, the right he's talking about is not some kind of moral idea. In fact, that's the very idea he's trying to deny even exists, right? He's I guess he's, instead of right, you could say something like a mandate to do something. Like if someone said, you don't have the right to do that, what they're saying in Stirner's eyes is, you don't have the mandate to do that. And his response would be, well, I just did it. So there's my ability itself, and my having done it before your eyes is my mandate that I was able to do it. Something like that, maybe. So when we come to very heinous crimes, like, oh, you didn't have the right to kill him. Well, I just did. I mean,
yeah.
So yeah, he's not saying that I was morally, and me killing him was morally better than not killing him. He's simply saying that my ability to kill that person, and not just my ability in the abstract, but actually going through with it and everything that entails that, right? So because everyone technically has the ability to kill someone, but to actually go through with it is another story, right? And so you're right. Your mandate to do something is only limited by the bounds you set for yourself, right? So even in a society of rights and laws and everything, murder is illegal, but technically, if you go out on the street, there are thousands of other humans who could kill you very easily if they wanted to, before the police even arrives there. And just because some court declared it illegal doesn't, on a physical level, mean that you're any more safe. So that really their right is determined by themselves and not by the court.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'll read a quote. What you have the power to be, you have the right to. I derive all right and all warrant from me. I am entitled to everything that I have in my power. I am entitled to overthrow Zeus, Jehovah, God, if I can. If I cannot, then these gods will always remain in the right and in power as against me. And what I do will be to fear their right and their power in impotent God-fearingness. I think that probably sums up a lot of what we've just talked about there. So, yeah, this what does this mean then in terms of like social rights? Or like like you said earlier, the right, talking about Mother Teresa, for example, like the right to a fair wage or the right to food. What would be the Stirnian response to that?
Well, I mean, let's take something a bit more like, let's take, for example, I think in the EU, or at least in Germany, a couple of years back, and I remember this being like an outcry in the conservative media. The EU or Germany, I can't remember which one, but they declared the access to internet a human right. Because in our modern day, it's just so essential to simply using basic services, right? Or even like registering for government stuff. So yeah, the obviously the basic conservative position would be, how can that be a human right? You're not entitled to the infrastructure and the labor of people who have built the internet, who are providing it to you, like the basic capitalist versus socialist kind of thing of like, how can you, by declaring something a right, you can't simply enslave other people to order them to provide it for you. Like, by what reason are you entitled to this? Why is this your right, other than your need, right? It's sure you need it, but how can you have a right to it?
Yeah.
And the Stirner perspective would be something like, if you're able to actually pay for it or get access to it in some other way, let's say maybe you hack into your neighbor's Wi-Fi, now you're actually grasping your right to internet. Or maybe you just have a job and you pay for it. There you go. I bought it from you. You said you would provide it. Now I have a right to it. But you just being a naked blob of flesh on this planet, like, unless you for yourself, with your own power, with your might, take internet, you don't have a right to it.
Yeah. there is an interesting point, and I don't have the quote right near me now, but he does talk about like communitarianism, or like kind of a communitarian like way of existing here, which is that, like, you know, if I'm violent towards you, or if you are in your own right to, with your own power, seek people that will stand behind you, and we'll all fight. I will fight your million people, and whoever comes out on top is the one who has the true right here. He says he gives like a question response from like a imaginary speaker, saying, "Why? Everything must go topsy-turvy if everyone could do what he would." End quote. Well, who says that everyone can do everything? What are you there for, pray? You who do not need to put up with everything. Defend yourself, and no one will do anything to you. He who would break your will has to do with you, and is your enemy. Deal with him as such. If there stand behind you for your protection some millions more, then you are an imposing power and will have an easy victory. But even if as a power you overawe your opponent, still you are not on that account a hallowed authority to him, unless he be a simpleton. He does not yet owe you respect and regard, even though he will have to consider your might. So he makes a, not a concession, but it's dissolvable within the idea of the state existing, and that kind of is the right of the state as well, in a way. I think he would probably say that insofar as there is a mutual benefit to be gained by everyone involved, then that is like an expression of some kind of communal right. But he also says that, like, I think it's later in the essay, and this is kind of just a criticism of democracy generally, that even if by some miracle we can all agree on one thing, by the next day this will be like our yesterday's right. I think he uses the word right. This will be only relevant to the singular moment that it is applicable. And maybe you think about like post 9/11, for example, like how America like really coagulated and coalesced and had this strong kind of sense of community, and then was obviously very easily swayed into going into the war in Iraq. But how that didn't stay, that kind of sentiment hasn't lasted.
Yes. I don't know if I can expound on that super deeply, but I'll introduce, or I guess I'll bring it around to what this text means for kind of anarcho-capitalism, individualism, and so on. So Stirner himself would not recognize, obviously, any other right than what you set for yourself. So if the libertarians say there are such things as natural rights, property rights, anything like that, Stirner would say, no, not really. However, I think what is interesting from the libertarian perspective is to use Stirner's argument to understand the prevailing existence of government and how it justifies itself truly. So we could, for example, look at a king who is obviously, very classic, just the strongest guy on top. He has all the power, and, maybe in his own mythology, he tells himself and maybe his people that his right to rule is given by God and such things. But really, it's because he's able to be in that position that he has the right to be in that position, and that's where all the right of the state is derived from. And then in democracy, we can tell ourselves maybe because everyone now has a vote and everyone is lord over their neighbor. We're now in an equal relationship, and therefore the state has the right to take away your taxes, or tax you, or to do whatever to you against your will. The state is still right because we all voted on whoever person is currently enforcing whatever transgression against you, right? So maybe you find yourself on a regular Tuesday and the government kicks down your door and it's like, we have to search this place because we have reason to suspect there are drugs in here or bombs or whatever. And you ask yourself, well, by what right are they searching my place? And while they could probably point to some fucking law or another, at the end of the day, isn't it really? Because they have a mandate from someone who was elected by this democratic process, etc., etc. And yeah, if you take the Stirner lens here, he would say, well, it's because they can. That's why they have the right.
Yeah. And you might couch it in some kind of democratic or legal right, but at the end of the day, it's that like that monopoly on power, I guess is the word, that like that gives them their true right here. And I know in these past couple episodes we've probably given too many references to Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, which is one of the books that we're going to be discussing soon. But there is a great moment in that book where a bunch of bureaucrats are basically speaking, and they're just like, we'll look through the laws and we'll find something that can take this guy down. There'll definitely be something, and it's like, the reason that is a viable way of doing it is because they have this ultimate power. It's like the same thing with that Al Capone, for example. It wasn't the fact that he was racketeering; it was these tax fraud that got him arrested in the end. It's not. It's like using the framework that exists in order to get your goal, to reach your goal, which is exercising your right over someone else.
Yeah, which is why the whole NSA spying on everyone thing is so scary, because if the government at some point in your life, when you're 15 or 50 or 85, wants to get rid of you for whatever thing, they just have to look in your texts and they will find something. Whatever it is actually the reason they want to get rid of you, they will find something else. And but
they'll find this public podcast.
Exactly. So the right of the state to exist is because they can. Why can't you go to a little island somewhere and simply, I don't know, maybe let's say some island that belongs to technically the UK, but there's no one really living there, and so you go on the beach and you set up your little house, and maybe you make there's some other guys following you, and you set up a little community, you make things and sell them to each other, and then the tax man comes and it's like, well, we got to get whatever it is in the UK, 20%, 15% of your sales as sales tax, mate. You can't. And also, by the way, this place you're living on right now, this is not your place. This is our place. Just letting you know.
Yeah, it's a sovereign land. Sorry, mate.
So it's like, why do they have the right? Is it because they are part of a democratically elected blah, blah, blah? Is it because they have the right from God? No, it's because they can. They have the ability and the power to do so. That is their mandate. That is their right to do so. And yeah, I think it's this more cynical or maybe more critical reading of Stirner that is interesting to libertarians. You know, it's shining a light on the true justification behind government, like the reason why government is able to exist and you're not, why you're not allowed to be on that land, but whoever policeman, whatever they send to you, is able to take it away from you, is because they are physically in the power to do so.
There's a very short quote here, which I think sums that up. He says, "The state's behavior is violence, and it calls its violence law, that of the individual crime." So it's only this power that allows that discrepancy to be made, and allows for this, like, essentially the same things, whether that's like destruction of property, whether that's theft of property, whether that's like physical violence, whether that's like slavery, which is another form of property seizure. It's only the fact that the state has the power that it's legitimized. You know, he also talks about it, and this this connects a lot to Spooner, and there's a mention of like duels, the fact that duels are like illegal. It's illegal for two people to fight it out in the streets because they have an issue, but there's no like baseline difference between that and between any kind of like equivalent violence that the state would like legalize, whether that's like going to war, for example, and legalizing under emergency conditions the murder of people by your army.
Yeah, very good reference to the text. As you said, if we took that, the state is in the right, and if you do the same thing, you're a criminal kind of thing. If we take the example with the island again, and we say, okay, same situation, there's still the state, and it still is a democracy, but now maybe you have amassed a bunch of friends, and they're all very powerful, and they have bigger guns than this. Maybe it's a small country. Maybe it's not the UK. Maybe it's, I don't know, Latvia or some shit. And you say, well, no, this is going to be my island, and you're not allowed on it, and that's it. And because you're stronger, or because you have more physical force, you're able to get away with it. Now the state would say that's not right. That's a transgression against our laws. But really, if there's no one to take you to justice for that, then it is right. Like you just did it. There is no consequence. So by all graspable metrics on planet Earth, Stirner would say you are in the right. Now the Christian might say, no, it's not right, and God will judge him. And the Stirner response would probably be, well, by what power does God get to do that? How can God put you in your place? Is it because some moral superiority, or is it because he's all powerful? It's because he can judge you that he will judge you, right? In your framework, right? If you were more powerful than God, then God wouldn't be judging you. Yeah,
100%. That's a really good point, and I think that's a good lead in to this discussion about God as well. There's a lot of discussion about Christianity, and it is, this guy and Nietzsche would have probably been best friends, and it's quite interesting how he kind of arrives at kind of similar conclusions, even mentioning like killing God. Imagine at the time, like a guy saying this would have been pretty crazy. But yeah, it's he would probably say that this, communal idea of right, which is this foreign idea of right in God, which is believed in by people, is what gives God its power, which is what defines virtue and sin. Whereas, but in reality, if you go against God, will you be punished? And of course, we wouldn't know that until we die. And maybe that's kind of the whole point here as well. So he's, if God is truly right, then we are all fucked for our sins, but we'll also never know that.
Yeah, and isn't like another way of saying God is the Almighty, right? So it's why is God in that position of, saying what is moral and what is not? Let's make a little experiment and say he created humanity, but humanity got more powerful than God, so they're actually able to let's take this really childish image of the man in the sky, right? So let's say we build something like the Tower of Babel and we climb up, and we actually, by some means or another, are able to overthrow God. Who is there to judge us now, right? I mean, the only reason why God was in any place to say what is good and what is evil, what you should do or what you shouldn't do, is literally because he's the Almighty. The belief in God itself is a repetition of the mantra, might is right, in Stirner's eyes.
Yeah. And probably linguistically as well. Like God is good. God is right. There's another quote here which is departing from this question of God now. Crimes spring from fixed ideas. The sacredness of marriage is a fixed idea. From the sacredness it follows that infidelity is a crime, and therefore a certain marriage law imposes upon it a shorter or longer penalty. But by those who proclaim, quote, freedom as sacred, this penalty must be regarded as a crime against freedom, and only in this sense has public opinion in fact branded the marriage law. I think this is quite a good example of like the way that this idea of like foreign common law and as well as this like contradiction between this freedom being sacred, but it has to be within the confines of what is considered publicly acceptable and also legal, and by extension legal. I don't know if you have anything to say on this.
I guess, would you as a first time reader look at this and say, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that Stirner was against being faithful to your wife? Is that what he's saying? ?
I wouldn't say that he's against being faithful, but he's saying rather that there is no such thing as a I guess in the context of a marriage, it's like a contract, and if you break that contract, you've gone against you're going against this contract, which is bad, but also at the same time you just did it. So
if you get away if she never knows and you get away with it, wouldn't Stirner say you're right?
I think so. He would definitely say there's no like there's no kind of moral penalty for being infidelity.
Would he then though say that if you get right, so we have this duality of things, right? On the one hand, if you get away with it, you're basically right. But if by not any fault of your own, a mere coincidence of fate, of randomness. Someone finds you out and takes you to court and tells your wife, and she takes you to court, and then you lose the house and everything by a completely random thing. How can you now be... He would then again say that you're... like, you taking this punishment is also right, because you weren't able to do it, right? So, but
you've failed to worm your way out of the punishment.
Yeah, but I guess you would have to make a specific scenario to really explain this. But like, can we not agree that sometimes getting away with it or not is a mere randomness of the universe, right?
Yeah.
So how can those two exist at the same time? You being right in cheating, but you also being right in getting caught for cheating?
I guess it's like the same thing with the God scenario. It's like, we don't know if God is all powerful until we die and we're punished for our sins. So, but if that, I guess if there's no... if you're never punished for it, whether that is because it was never found out, or because if you were never punished for it because you were never kind of confronted with someone else's attempt at power or right over you for what they saw as transgression, then I'm tempted to say that that's a difficult one.
I guess yeah, go on.
You know, it's like, if you maybe there is no... I mean, I think they can still... maybe he would say that they can still... It's still like an exercise of your right in like cheating and never being found out, purely because it's you acting in your own self-interest, and it doesn't rely necessarily on the battle between someone else and overcoming a battle of rights between you and someone else, right? It's just about you acting on your interest, and if it so happens that your interest conflicts with someone else's interest, that's where the battle for the might battle occurs, right?
But in contemporary society, and I guess also in this example, it's not just those two people's might at play. We also have the state involved, right? So you can get sued, and yeah, if you're found to be unfaithful, I guess could be legal consequences. And so by what right does the state impose that on you? And so we have, now we have a complicated net of multiple...
Yeah. Multiple interests. Yeah.
What I want to add is that I think the Stirner, while this is very interesting and thought-provoking, I think the Stirner perspective lacks a critical element, which I think is also not included in the rest of the book. I've read some reviews, and which Ayn Rand can kind of provide. So in the cheating example, we took the kind of fountainhead Ayn Rand perspective would be that you're actually cheating yourself as well, because now you have to live with the knowledge that you broke a contract, you couldn't stay true to your word, and that's going to affect you, and probably as you get older as well, eat you up. and make you feel shitty about yourself. So that is more than outweigh the benefit of whatever momentary pleasure you might have gained. And obviously, if you get divorced and so on, then you also have to suffer those consequences. So there's a bit more control in Ayn Rand's philosophy, I guess. Like Stirner basically says, go ape shit, and then you go ape shit, you get in prison, and you come crying to Stirner like, oh, but you said go ape shit, and he holds the book to you and he's like, no, it says it right there in the subtext. If you go ape shit, you also take the consequences for going ape shit, bro.
Yeah, well, I think it doesn't have a moral. There's no like moral premise or like backbone to it, right? And maybe this is why he's regarded as nihilist, because I do get this kind of like feels slightly parallel to like moral relativism or something, where it's like nothing. There's no moral virtue trumps another moral virtue. Everything's all the same. Everything's equal. He doesn't go as far as saying that anything is equal, but he's rather saying that there's no value attached. There's no moral value attached to these actions. And so you do what you want, and if people have a problem with that, then they'll try and address that, and they'll try and take you down for it. And it's whether or not you can defeat them in that battle that defines whether you continue to exist in the same way or not, and where you find your kind of foot in the hierarchy. But it doesn't say anything about the character of your action, or like the character that is behind those actions. Yeah, for like, Rand, which is much more moralistic philosophy, I think it's like, you've kind of betrayed yourself, or betrayed a contract with someone, and it's not about whether you can get away with it or not. It's about it's about like following some kind of deep spiritual, personal kind of like sense of what is right in the sense of like good, I guess.
But also you've reinforced, I guess, a negative habit that's gonna breed unsuccessfulness in the future. Like if you become someone who doesn't keep their word and breaks contracts, then that's gonna take you a place that's suboptimal.
It's not just that breaking contract will, maybe you could say if you broke a contract, someone can exercise their right over you by never dealing with you anymore in business, and you suffer the consequences because of that, right? No one will loan you money, no one will want to do business with you, no one will want to buy your stuff because of your terrible reputation, and that's a failure of your right. Whereas like the powerful industrialist that we spoke about earlier can get away with it because everyone needs his product, and he has a huge resource that the world needs, and he has the ability to do that. But if you don't have those conditions, and if those conditions don't last, then you'll succumb to the right of others.
Yeah, or to even stay with the example, you maybe think to yourself, I can have a wife and a girlfriend, and then you're staring at being 40 with 3 divorces, and
that's a good example. Yeah, it's
like, what kind of partners are you gonna attract now?
Yeah. So I think my kind of impression of this is it's more kind of like it's helpful in understanding law, and it's helpful in understanding like rules that we impose in society and our own kind of autonomy within that, but it says nothing about how you should act. It's just kind of like and it reads pretty much like this is just how things are. And and I think it feels like a pretty solid analysis, to be honest. I think there are lots of examples in the world where this is like proved, and I mean the fact that it is proved is like an indication of this, right? You know, it's like, you know, the fact that some people sink and some people swim when they commit the same crime is on account of their own right. And also as well, it's worth saying that this right doesn't care. It has nothing to do, you know, it's not weighed in consideration of he talks about the word privilege a lot. It's not weighed in terms of your privilege or your connections. You know, this privilege could be where you descend from. It could be the people that you know. It could be the, you know, genetic advantages that you have. It could be to do with the environment that you grow up in. It could be to do with any of these things. Any of these things could give you an advantage and give you the right to overcome a certain situation. But in the final analysis, like none of this, how do I put it? Like, it's the very existence of these things that gives you the power to overcome things. And so there's no kind of, how do I say, it doesn't matter, you know, if it's like, for example, if you're like, you know, like a Nepo baby, like you're a child of nepotism and you get a job in the music industry and you're a famous musician, people say, oh, you're just a Nepo baby, like you don't deserve your fame, you don't deserve your album sales or whatever. And to that you just say, you know, in Stirner's case, like, well, I've got the album sales, I have the success, I might have this privilege, I might have succeeded on these connections, but none of that matters because I have this power.
Yeah, so that other person saying you have no right to blah 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 blah, would be Stirner saying that's a foreign right, and that could be anything. That could be God, society, law, whatever. And so he disregards all these foreign rights. I guess one final scenario. Sorry, you wanted to add something?
I was just going to say the foreign right in this situation with this kind of music thing could the foreign kind of law. You know, maybe this is like the, you know, there's this like nepotism conversation a lot in America, you know, where culturally there's this the concept of, you know, the American dream and meritocracy and the fact that anyone can make it, whether you're in the, you know, the grips of poverty. And so maybe the kind of the foreign law here is that like you have to be self-made, you know, and if you're not self-made, that's kind of an insult to this American dream idea, maybe.
Yeah, also, and more specifically, maybe also that person saying that thing, whatever their conceptions are about equality and so on, right?
Yeah. And I also think as well, just like one final thing here, like I do kind of think as well, like people like thinking about this, I think people kind of exercise this right far more than they realize in like very small ways. In the kind of contradictions people have about, you know, their opinions about celebrities or famous business people or whatever, holding them to certain standards that they don't necessarily hold to themselves or to the people around them. You know, one thing that I've been thinking about a couple days ago was to do with like, you know there was all that discussion about like Trump is going to go for a third term in 2028, and everyone's like up in arms about this idea, right? But you know, like America is one country that has, and I mean this is not like a I'm not trying to project any opinion on this situation, but in Canada, for example, there are no term limits for a prime minister, and Trudeau's been in power for like 10 years or something at this point, and no one really seems to care about that. No one really seems to care about the fact that Trudeau's been in power for so long. But as soon as it comes to kind of like, desecrating this like law, about term limits in America, it's less about the fact. It's less about, the idea that someone would continue to be in power, but it's more about the problems people seem to have more is it's about the fact that it would be breaking the law, or like breaking the Constitution in doing this, right?
Yeah, and even it does make sense, and we don't even have to go to Canada. I mean, even I think it was Roosevelt who served more than 2 terms in the U.S., and we're not really upset about that.
Yeah, and it's the arbitrariness of laws, and like, yeah, it's like the fact that he did it is because he could do it, and that also, he can do it because he won like a democratic majority, or he did it because he did it because he had the will of the people behind him. It's not necessarily like being tyrannical in like individual. It can work in lots of different ways, and it can be backed up by lots of different influences and forces.
Yeah, I think in these kind of discussions about democracy, this, might is right thing is pretty much exemplified quite well. I mean, we have Ukraine, for example, which is, the kind of base American understanding of why the US should aid Ukraine is because they are a democracy, and Russia is a dictatorship kind of thing. Also, there's also obviously the fact that Russia was the aggressor in this case, but but we often hear in the media about like how this bond of democracy is connecting the bond of friendship between the EU and Ukraine, or America and Ukraine. It's like, which is this democracy you're talking about? About this guy who has literally suspended elections. There are no more elections, right? And also, his administration came into power by America subverting the previous administration and backing a coup, and unconstitutionally putting this administration into power. So, is this really, right because of democracy, or is it right because we can do that? Is it might is right?
Yeah. Scott Horton, Unprovoked episode coming later this year.
All right, okay. There's one last scenario I wanted to
go into your final scenario.
So what if there is let's again go with the uninhabited island, except it's inhabited because I just put a person there.
Wow.
In other words, an island, and there is a terrible flooding, and many people die.
Sorry, if you put me on that island with your right, and then I kill myself, that's me exercising my right and winning in this situation. You will not put me on the island.
Nick already killed himself, so he won. I'm still here.
All right, thanks for listening. Bye.
No.
Sorry, go on.
So these people, they're born on the island. Let's say they're born on the island and they don't know anything about the world. And now they get flooded and many people die, or even everyone dies perhaps. What would Stirner say? Would he say, okay, and someone proclaims that's not right. Would he say it's their inability to get off the island or to not drown that, makes it right? Or would he say that since this is not a conflict between people, but simply a natural disaster, this isn't even in the sphere of right?
Ooh, that's he does talk about nature.
Mm-hmm.
Is this in connection to its talk about nature?
Not
like
consciously,
specifically in the book, or okay.
No.
So, uninhabited island, inhabited by people, or we could say one person, but they don't survive because nature overcomes them.
Yeah, but some guy who lives on the continent is fine. The classical like kind of atheist point almost would be to say a world where this happens is not right, and therefore I reject your God or whatever. So in this exclamation of this is not right, this is unjust, this is unjust, what would Stirner say? Would he say no, it's just because they couldn't avoid it, or would he say this is not even in the realm of justice or right because it's like a tree falling over, no one did this?
Yeah. I mean, I think he would say that, yeah, it's a tree falling, no one did this. There's no such thing as there's no such thing as a transgression by nature. Because like nature is not a force. I mean, it is a force that has power, and it is a force that we reckon with. It is a force that we overcome. We do exercise our power over nature.
Like when I don't know if Stirner agrees to this. This is kind of property rights, so maybe he doesn't agree with this. But if you find a bare spot of land and you toil the ground and you make a little farm, we usually would say, especially in the libertarian circles, that this guy has conquered nature by his labor and now he has a right to that farm. He's kind of demonstrated, I guess, a right over, well, I guess not a right over nature, a right over other people to having that plot of land. So yeah.
Yeah. That would be like a social thing. So, he does. There is a quote here which might help us to get to this, to get to a conclusion. It is talking about nature. I'll read the whole thing because there might be some other bits here. It's bits about birth and inheritance, like by nature. If for the whole world something were not right, but if it were right for me, that is, I wanted it, then I would ask nothing about the whole world. So everyone does who knows how to value himself, everyone in the degree that he is an egoist, for might goes before right, and that with perfect right. Because I am, quote, by nature a man, I have an equal right to the enjoyment of all goods, says Babeuf. Must he not also say, because I am by nature a firstborn prince? No, this is more in the, talking about inheritance.
Yeah, it's more of a social thing, but also an interesting point, right?
It is, yeah.
Like
I was
goes
back to what we're talking about, like privilege and stuff.
Yeah, if you say you're born with natural rights, or the right to equality, and then so could the king say, I was born as a king, and therefore I deserve all this shit, and you don't.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess we'll just leave it. Oh,
well, he talks about the right of property. It says the communists affirm that, quote, the earth belongs rightfully to him who tills it, and its products to those who bring them out. I think it belongs to him who knows how to take it, or who does not let it be taken from him, does not let himself be deprived of it. And again, this is like the social thing. This is going back to what you said. Also, you just agreed with the communist.
I was thinking that by reading that passage, it's like that's literally the libertarian justification for property rights. I don't know if that's the communist.
Well.
Like, I think at this time we still had 1844, so terms were a bit up in arms, but
Yeah, for sure. I think it does say like a couple times. It does say once in my version here in the footnotes that communism was not really like a super well thought out concept at the time, even though I think there are a lot of people that obviously this is the time of Engels and Marx. The
later position, of course, would be that, especially in more basic societies like the whole kulak thing in Ukraine, if you till more ground and till it better than your neighbor, then you already fucked up.
Yeah, exactly. To go back to this main point though, this main question, maybe it's in this case, maybe you could say that your nature is its own force. Maybe this is like such an essential thing here that he hasn't even mentioned it. Or maybe it's just kind of like not really the point. Like nature is like a given in any situation, no matter what you do.
I guess if he was convinced that God existed, which clearly he isn't, but he would say something like, so if the atheist said, this God has no right to kill these people for no reason, they haven't done anything wrong, he would just say, he has the right because he can. And that's actually that's kind of similar to the actual Christian position, is it not? Like, because God made life, he can take it away kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing I would say, so, you've given the example of like a remote island to remove any other influence, but I think, you saying, what you were saying, like, it's, the position would be, it's not right that these people would suffer some kind of natural disaster. But, often the blame is actually directed to people who could have some responsibility over it. It's like the Fukushima disaster, for example, in Japan. In 2011, an earthquake off the Sea of Japan caused a tsunami that destroyed the Fukushima nuclear plant and flooded nuclear waste for miles inland, disrupted the lives of like hundreds of thousands of people. It's like now the criticism lies with the nuclear plant and their failure to deactivate the reactors in time and stuff like that, right? And so it would be, it's like grounded. There's like a responsibility from other people, and maybe even some kind of more abstract situation. It's like because we all live in a society, whether we kind of like it or not, we all live within some kind of social or government system. There's always going to be some kind of system to take the blame. Government negligence, for example, like some corporate negligence that can be attributed to some outcome, right? The houses weren't built strong enough to survive an earthquake, and that's the fault of the government not applying proper regulations, stuff like that, right? Or it's the manufacturers not manufacturing to an adequate standard.
Yeah, and I think that is also connected to why I think this pure Stirnerism is not super helpful for us as like instruction on how to act, because at the end of the day, you're always in some kind of net of society or government, as you said. And so like if you're just like an average citizen in North Korea, and like, first of all, everything you're told from birth is completely a lie and you're completely brainwashed, and like you couldn't. There isn't any method how you could even have the tools to know the truth. But how is it really helpful from like a Stirner perspective to say, oh, if they died in a camp, then they kind of had it coming because they didn't figure out how to not do that. Like, it's just not super helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the same with like the Holocaust example, right, from the beginning.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. Cool. Well.
Cool. Nick's comment on the Holocaust. Yeah, cool.
We end where we begin. Closing thoughts. I think it's a great read. I think it's it has the kind of like pithy. There are some kind of parts in the middle where I think, and towards the end, like the last half/third, which I think aren't quite as interesting or relevant. But I think it's so short and so like dense, and I think pretty well reasoned. It has that same kind of Spooner feel, right? It's like this. The argumentation is quite clear, and yeah, whenever maybe it's not the best guiding philosophy for your own life, but I think it's a good way of understanding the nature of like relationships between people, and is definitely when people cry about someone doing something that's unconstitutional or doing something that's illegal, you have a pretty clear answer there why these things are happening, and a reality in the world which is pretty hard to argue against, I think. So very foundational for sure.
Amen. I have nothing to add.
Cool. Right, well, we hope that you've enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you in the next one. What is our next read, Phil?
It's fuck you. It's on. It's
I always ask you the most basic questions, and you're like, fuck.
It is also about law and rights, but I don't know the exact title as of right now. So stay tuned for more moral shit. Hey.
I think I have this here. It's John Hasnas, The Myth of the Rule of Law, 1995. Which Phil has described as awesome in capital letters. So awesome that he forgot the fucking name of it, but we'll overlook that.
All right. Good night.
All right. Take it easy. Bye-bye.